On June 13, 2001, 14-year-old Aaron James Luhaya Ogata was swimming in the Wailuku River with his cousin when something powerful and completely unstoppable suddenly pulled him under. The terrified cousin rushed for help, bringing rescue teams, followed by a helicopter and a dive unit. But when they finally found him, Aaron was already showing no signs of life. The boy was rushed to the emergency room at Hilo Medical Center, only to be pronounced dead less than an hour later. And sadly, this was just one of many tragic accidents in the history of a Hawaiian river known locally as Narnia, which has been mercilessly taking the lives of young people, children, and even professional swimmers for over 3 decades. But, as always, viewer discretion is advised. Hawaii's Big Island is one of the most popular destinations in the U.S., attracting both domestic travelers and international tourists, with around 1,776,000 visitors each year. While most travelers head to the sunny western side, Kona, drawn by its beaches, luxury resorts, and near year-round sunshine, many also choose the island's more adventurous east. In addition to tropical forests and numerous national parks, the Hilo side is known for the longest river in the entire state, the 45-kilometer-long Wailuku River, which flows from Mauna Kea all the way to the Pacific Ocean. A section of this crystal-clear waterway runs through the Wailuku River State Park, offering free entry 7 days a week, short hiking trails, and guided tours for its visitors. However, the park's main attraction, and the river's crown jewel, is its waterfalls, especially Rainbow Falls, whose name isn't accidental at all. Around 10 a.m., mist rises from the 24-meter-high waterfall and creates frequent rainbows in the morning sunlight. Therefore, locals highly recommend visiting it, especially in the early hours. And one of those visitors was 23-year-old Paul Gregory Fite from Corona del Mar, California. On June 15, 1990, he arrived in Hilo for summer vacation with 2 college friends from Loyola Marymount University, planning to explore the island and see its main pearl. But like many young travelers, they couldn't resist the temptation to jump into the water, and that decision would prove fatal. Since just a few hours later, Paul's father, Thomas Fite, received a panicked phone call from his son's friends, who sadly said that Paul had drowned. It turned out Paul had been caught in a fast-moving stream that dragged him straight toward the edge of the falls. He did survive the initial drop, and even resurfaced briefly, but couldn't fight the current while injured. Later, his father said, apparently he hit his head on something when he went over the waterfall. And indeed, falling into fast-moving water from nearly 25 meters can be as devastating as hitting solid concrete, especially if the body lands flat or head first, not to mention the rocks below, where a single strike can cause blunt force trauma, broken bones, or serious internal injuries before the water even pulls you under. 12 years later, a nearly identical tragedy struck again. On March 26, 2022, the lifeless body of 37-year-old Adam David Broom was found floating face down at the base of Rainbow Falls. Rescuers airlifted Adam out of the water and transported him to the nearest medical center. The specialists later confirmed that he had fallen over the waterfall and drowned, overwhelmed by the same violent current. But this deadly force isn't limited to the falls alone. Wailuku River is notorious for its powerful, fast-descending flow. In some sections, it drops as much as 47.5 meters per kilometer, creating dangerously strong currents and violently churning water throughout its course. And it's no coincidence, since the Hawaiian name Wailuku literally translates to water of destruction. However, another deceptive danger of the river is how quickly its currents can change, even on seemingly sunny days. That's exactly what happened on August 10, 2016, when 41-year-old Alejandro Barrios from Orange, California, decided to cool off in the calm river with his family. But during the swim, the current suddenly intensified, and Alejandro began to drown. One of the family members jumped in to save him and even managed to grab him for a moment. But the force of the river tore Alejandro out of their grasp and dragged him straight to the bottom. Panicked, the family called 911. When rescuers arrived, they used chainsaws to clear fallen trees and began a full-scale free-dive search. Eventually, they found Alejandro's body motionless at a depth of nearly 9 meters. His family was haunted by the tragedy for years. They knew he wasn't a strong swimmer, and they simply couldn't pull him out in time. But there was one case where pulling someone out wasn't even an option, because simply, no one was left to save them. In late November 2017, a married couple traveled to Hawaii for a short holiday, an early Christmas gift, and a chance to take a break from their intensive community work and daily responsibilities. Together, they were prominent leaders in the International Cottages, a cultural program in San Diego representing dozens of nations through exhibits, festivals, and public outreach. Gladys Novinger, 62, a native of Peru, was one of the founding members of the House of Peru in Balboa Park. Her husband, 61-year-old George Novinger, had recently retired from a long career as a U.S. diplomat with the State Department's Foreign Service and was actively supporting Gladys in her mission to connect people across cultures. On November 25th, around 12:30 p.m., the couple visited Wuku River State Park to enjoy the view from above Rainbow Falls. At one point during their walk, they attempted to cross the river, about 90 meters upstream from the edge of the waterfall, but as soon as they stepped onto the rocks, the current knocked them off balance. Horrified witnesses immediately called 911 as they saw the couple struggling in the water and then being swept away before vanishing beneath the surface. Several hours later, the rescuers were able to find Gladys unconscious in the pool directly below the falls. The woman was immediately airlifted to Hilo Medical Center, but unfortunately, it was already too late, and Gladys Novinger was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Meanwhile, George Novinger remained missing for nearly 7 days. Since heavy rain and flash flooding forced rescue teams to suspend their search multiple times, there was little hope he had survived. And on December 1st, that fear was confirmed. George's body was found near the shoreline of Hilo Bay, just 3.2 kilometers downstream from where the couple had found their tragic end from freshwater drowning. Gladys and George Novinger were honored back home in San Diego with a candlelit vigil in Balboa Park. The House of Peru, which they had devoted their later years to, eventually named a new cottage in the couple's memory. On the day of the ceremony, their adult son, Joseph Harms III, also shared heartfelt words about his parents. They were the best of the best. It is beyond tragic. They are missed deeply. I will always carry them in my heart, and I dedicate my life to their legacy. With each passing year, the Wuku River grew more unpredictable. In August 2018, during Hurricane Lane and the subsequent massive flooding, the river's flow rate was recorded at a shocking 2,322 cubic meters per second. Just for context, anything over 5.66 cubic meters per second is already considered high and potentially dangerous. And that same year, another tragedy unfolded, only this time during what appeared to be a sudden flash flood. On February 25, 2018, dramatic footage of an ongoing rescue operation spread across the internet. It showed helicopters finally recovering the body of 28-year-old Kelly Mrowinski of Chicago, who had gone missing a month earlier on January 26th. That day, Kelly had set out on a hiking trip near Pi'ihonua Falls with a male colleague. But suddenly, the river swelled and broke its banks, hitting them both with a powerful wall of water. Kelly's hiking partner managed to reach the shore. She, however, was violently swept away, deep into the Wuku River. Unfortunately, immediate searches of the surrounding areas turned up nothing, and only long weeks later, someone spotted a body falling from the edge of Rainbow Falls. It was Kelly Mrowinski, carried nearly 4.5 kilometers downstream from where she and her colleague had been struck. Right after the operation, Kelly's body, like dozens of other Wuku River victims, was airlifted and taken to Hilo Medical Center for further examination. And in a cruel twist of fate, Kelly Mrowinski had just arrived in Hawaii for work as a travel nurse on assignment at that very medical center, which would eventually confirm her own death from drowning. But not all tragic ends along the Wuku River have been the result of drowning. The river hides another danger, one that can strike even in shallow water. Unlike many rivers with consistent flow or depth, Wailuku's 45-kilometer stretch is marked by extreme variation, from deep pools near Rainbow Falls to rapid rocky sections where the water is barely waist deep. One of these sections was known as the ropes, a popular area with a swinging rope that young people use to drop into the pools below, pretty much like Tarzan. However, like many other parts of the river, the ropes zone can become extremely dangerous. Only in this specific case, during dry weather or upstream water diversions, when the depth drops sharply and jagged rocks become exposed just beneath the surface. And many who dared to swing in such conditions unfortunately paid the ultimate price. Back in July 1988, rescue teams recovered the lifeless body of 21-year-old Adrian D. Ward from the rope swing area. Then, many years later, in March 2007, the body of another 20-year-old man was found about 90 to 180 meters upstream from the same location, bearing injuries consistent with blunt impact trauma. It is believed that both men used the rope swing. However, instead of landing in deep water, they brutally struck the rocks below, with the current later carrying one of the bodies downstream. But one of the most striking incidents occurred on January 1st, 2006. That day, 20-year-old local resident Puna was standing on the wooden railing of the Puna Bridge, preparing to jump into the Wuku River. Just as he leaped, a section of the wood suddenly broke, causing him to miss the water entirely and fall directly onto the nearby rocks. During the fall from the 9-meter-high bridge, Puna was descending at roughly 15 meters per second, and while falling into water at that speed can still be survivable, landing on solid rock leaves almost no chance. To put it into perspective, it is equivalent to being hit by a car at highway speed with no protection. And unfortunately, Puna was no exception, eventually dying instantly from severe blunt force trauma to the head and legs. Interestingly, the Puna Bridge, where Puna met his tragic end, lies just upriver from another breathtaking but equally deadly section of the Wuku River. Boiling Pots is a series of terraced pools and short waterfalls carved out by the river as it flows over ancient basalt lava. Despite its name, many first-time visitors expect to see natural hot springs, but actually, that's not the case. The water temperature there is about the same as the rest of the river, typically ranging from between 18 degrees Celsius and 24 degrees Celsius. But what makes Boiling Pots unique is the violent bubbles and swirling currents that rise to the surface, especially after heavy rain. And while this place may look like a natural spa, swimming there is incredibly dangerous. The riverbed beneath Boiling Pots is riddled with concealed lava tubes, caves, and vertical columns, all remnants of ancient volcanic activity. During periods of strong flow, swimmers can be pulled below the surface and trapped inside these underwater formations. Therefore, escaping that kind of geological trap is nearly impossible, even for experienced swimmers. And one such professional, unfortunately, proved that by becoming another victim of the notorious Wuku River. 29-year-old Jan Callahan had just moved to Hawaii from Farmington, Utah, after accepting a full-time position as a high school trainer on the Big Island. And January 29, 2006 was supposed to be a relaxing moment before her first day on the new job. That afternoon, Jan visited Pee Pee Falls, located just upriver from Boiling Pots, with a group of new friends. After a picnic, she jumped into the water, swam out confidently, and even turned back to give the group a thumbs up while posing for a photo. According to her sister, Rebecca Shapiro, Jan could tread water for 45 minutes without effort. She was an experienced swimmer, a former athletic trainer for both Weber State and Brigham Young University. Therefore, there was no reason to think anything could go wrong. However, as Jan started swimming back to shore, she was caught in the current and suddenly disappeared underwater. And, as her sister later said, that was the last anyone saw of her. Massive search operations began immediately. Helicopters scanned the stretch of river near Pee Pee Falls, where divers searched the deep, lava-carved pools downstream. But the only finding was a single black shoe discovered near the water's edge. Exhausting days followed for Jan's family, with even her mother, Joanne Callahan, losing hope of finding her daughter alive and saying a truly heartbreaking phrase, "Until this happened to us, I had no idea how important it was to find a body." Finally, on the 5th day of searching on February 3rd, Jan's body was spotted by helicopter floating downstream toward Hilo Bay. It was later determined that on the day of the tragedy, she had been pulled into one of the underwater cave-like traps near Boiling Pots and held there for nearly a week. Despite her strength and training, she never had a chance to escape, and neither did the man in our last case. On September 17, 2024, emergency services received a call from alarmed witnesses who had seen a man enter the water at Boiling Pots and almost immediately get pulled under by the rapids, never resurfacing. Rescue personnel from the Hawaii Fire Department and the Division of Conservation and Resources Enforcement responded to the scene and began searching the area. However, it wasn't until the second day of the search on September 19th that they were able to locate the body. The man, later identified as 42-year-old Stanley Walker II of Pensacola, Florida, was recovered from a depth of approximately 9 meters beneath one of the Boiling Pots pools. Swept away by the current, he, like Jan Callahan, instantly became trapped in one of the river's underwater caves and eventually tragically lost his life while drowning without any hope of help. After all these tragic deaths in different parts of the same river, I think you're probably asking yourself the same question I did. Why has nothing been done all these years to finally stop people from dying there? And honestly, I don't know the answer. While there were barriers and warning signs advising against swimming, alerting about strong currents, flash flooding, and jumping hazards, it's clear that they simply weren't enough. Each new Hilo mayor promised to address the situation around the water of destruction and finally make the area safe. But in reality, nothing meaningful was done. So eventually, people continued to die, year after year, for at least 3 decades. One local resident whose yard backs right onto the river once told police during yet another investigation, "When you hear the sound of the helicopter from the backyard, you know something has happened." And then the man sadly added that he had been hearing that exact sound every 12 to 18 months. Yet serious action was only taken in early 2025 when officials finally decided to apply a method already proven successful at another tourist site in Hawaii, the extremely dangerous Olamana Trail hiking route in Oahu. Since 2011, at least 6 people have died there. But starting in November 2022, clear and direct warning signs were installed, including the actual number of people who had lost their lives, just to catch the attention of tourists. And eventually, it worked. Seeing the numbers made visitors more cautious and more realistic about their limits, fearing they'd become the next victim listed on the sign. And that same approach was finally brought to the Wuku River. After the new warning sign was put up, listing at least 27 known fatalities up until now, the death of Stanley Walker II is considered the most recent recorded fatal accident in the river. Still, the real number is likely higher, since, even in this video, I've mentioned cases dating back before 1995. And there's more. Hawaii County Fire Battalion Chief Bob Bailey once told Deseret Morning News that the Wuku River has claimed more lives than any other river, and that he personally lost 2 friends back in 1967 when they were swimming in the river. But although nearly a year has now passed without a tragedy following the improved warnings, people still continue to swim in those same dangerous waters that have taken dozens of lives. It's not up to me to judge, but I do want to ask you, would you dare to swim in the Wuku River? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking, real-life stories that one day may prevent you from becoming part of yet another chilling warning sign.